Virginia Durr, Wetumpka, Alabama. It is an old family house on the outskirts of Montgomery. A creek runs by. She and her husband, Clifford, are of an old Alabamian lineage. During Franklin Roosevelt's administration, he was a member of the Federal Communications Commission. She had been a pioneer in the battle to abolish the poll tax. Oh no, the Depression was not a romantic time. It was a time of terrible suffering. The contradictions were so obvious that it didn't take a very bright person to realize something was terribly wrong. Have you ever seen a child with rickets? Shaking as with palsy. No proteins, no milk, and the companies pouring milk into gutters. People with nothing to wear, and they were plowing up cotton. People with nothing to eat, and they killed the pigs. If that wasn't the craziest system in the world, could you imagine anything more idiotic? This was just insane. And people blamed themselves, not the system. They felt they had been at fault. If we hadn't bought that old radio, if we hadn't bought that old secondhand car. Among the things that horrified me were the preachers, the fundamentalists. They would tell the people they suffered because of their sins, and the people believed it. God was punishing them. Their children were starving because of their sins. People who were independent, who thought they were masters and mistresses of their lives, were all of a sudden dependent on others. Relatives, a relief. People of pride went into shock in sanitariums. My mother was one. Up to this time, I had been a conformist, a Southern snob. I actually thought the only people who amounted to anything were the very small group which I belonged to. The fact that my family wasn't as well off as those of the girls I went with, I was vice president of the junior league, made me value even more the idea of being well born. What I learned during the Depression changed all that. I saw a blinding light like Saul on the road to Damascus. It was the first time I had seen the other side of the tracks. The rickets, the pellagra. It shook me up. I saw the world as it really was. She shamed, cajoled, and persuaded the dairy company into opening milk dispensaries. When they sought to back down, she convinced them that if these people got a taste of milk, they might get in the habit of buying it when they got jobs. When the steel companies closed down in Birmingham, thousands were thrown out of work. She was acquainted with some of the executives. She argued with them. You feed the mules who work in your mines. Why don't you feed the people? You're responsible. The young today are just play acting in courting poverty. It's all right to wear jeans and eat hamburgers, but it's entirely different from not having any hamburgers to eat and no jeans to wear. A great many of these kids, white kids, seem to have something in the background they can always go to. I admire their spirit because they have a strong sense of social justice, but they themselves have not been deprived. They haven't experienced the terror. They have never seen a baby in the cradle crying of hunger. I think the reason for the gap between the black militants and the young white radicals is that the black kids are much more conscious of the thin edge of poverty and how soon you can be reduced to living on relief. What you know and what you feel are very different. Terror is something you feel. When there is no paycheck coming in, the absolute stark terror. What frightens me is that these kids are like sheep being led to slaughter. They are romantic, and they are young. I have a great deal more faith in movements that start from necessity. People trying to change things because of their own deprivation. We felt that in the labor surge of the 30s. The people who worked hardest to organize were the ones in the shops and in the mills. The Depression affected people in two different ways. The great majority reacted by thinking money is the most important thing in the world. Get yours and get it for your children. Nothing else matters. Not having that stark terror come at you again. And there was a small number of people who felt the whole system was lousy. You have to change it. The kids come along and they want to change it too, but they don't seem to know what to put in its place. I'm not so sure I know either. I do think it has to be responsive to people's needs. And it has to be done by democratic means, if possible. Whether it's possible or not, the power of money is such today, I just don't know. Some of the kids call me a relic of the 30s. Well, I am.